I'm having a great time preparing 1 Peter. I hope you're going to read ahead a little bit in 1 Peter because we'll soon be taking that journey together. Please open to Colossians chapter 4. I had thought that this might be the last session for our study, but it's going to require one more. In the 4th chapter, we were talking in our last session together about prayer. So let's read the first couple of verses. Continue in prayer and watch in the same with thanksgiving. Paul could put more in one verse, and we talked about these things last Wednesday night. Continue in prayer, that is, always be in an attitude of prayer. Never get to the place where you have to decide to pray. Always let prayer be the thing that comes natural. Always keep a prayerful heart. Continue in prayer. And watch in the same. That is, be alert in your prayer life. And then do it with thanksgiving. And that's the 6th time that Paul has mentioned giving thanks in the book of Colossians. Then in the next verse, he made a personal request for prayer. With all praying also for us, that God would open unto us a door of utterance, to speak the mystery of Christ, for which I am also in bonds, that I may make it manifest as I ought to speak. He asked them to pray for him, shut up there in the Roman prison, not knowing how much longer he would have to live. What does he ask them to pray for? That he could be released from prison? No. That the trial that may come about may go in his favor? No. When he asked them to pray for him, he asked them to pray that the doors of opportunity will open to him to share the gospel. And that he will be faithful in doing that. That was his request of them. Might as well be honest about it. If it had been me, I'd been asking them to pray to get me out of this prison. Not Paul. Pray that the doors of opportunity will continue to open. And pray for me that I will be faithful to enter those doors with the gospel. This man was something special. Scholars call him God's greatest man. He was a preacher. He was a missionary. He was a statesman. He was an intellect. He was an author and wrote more books than anybody else in the New Testament. His one thought was getting the gospel to the next person. Enter every opportunity that comes as an open door with the gospel. And there's no telling how many people he won to the Lord or how many churches he established. but his influence is as strong today as it ever was. And if you walk into most any church on Sunday morning, it is likely that in the course of the sermon, the pastor will be quoting or reading from the Apostle Paul. What a great, great man. If Paul, as great as he was, needed prayer, how much more do I need prayer? If he was always asking his friends to pray for him, isn't it likely that you and I need the prayers of our friends, even more so than he did? Now, the second admonition that he gives in this paragraph is verse 5. Walk in wisdom toward them that are without, redeeming the time. So right out by the side of that verse, walk the walk. Walk in wisdom toward them that are without, redeeming the time. Now let's think about that for a minute. In our study up until this time, Paul has majored on the fellowship of the church and the things that we are to do in the body of believers for each other, and how much we are dependent upon each other in the fellowship of the church. And Parker made reference to that up here, how much you enjoy the fellowship of this church and how much we mean to each other. That has been his thought throughout Colossians. But now suddenly he changes. And he talks about those who are without. What does that mean? He's talking about those who are not in the body, those who are not believers, those who are on the outside. You ever thought about this? Because you are a believer, you're on the inside of God's things. The unsaved people are on the outside. And he says, walk in wisdom toward those who are outside. Not only do you have responsibility for each other in the body, but you have a responsibility to live before those who are outside the body as a witness for Jesus Christ. This was a favorite term that Paul used a lot of times. Hold your place and turn over a few pages to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. And in the 4th chapter, look at the 12th verse. That you may walk honestly toward them that are what? Without. Those on the outside. Be a witness to them. Turn over a few more pages to 1 Timothy chapter 2. And in 1 Timothy chapter 2, I'm so sorry, it's chapter 3. Look at verse 7. Moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without. Talking about the minister, the preacher, God's called servant. He must have a good report of those on the outside. So it was a term that Paul used often. But now let's look at this. Paul said, walk in wisdom before the unsaved, before those who are not believers, those who are on the outside, so that your witness may win some of them to the inside. What does it mean to walk in wisdom? I'm glad you asked that question. I like it when you ask good questions like that. It really means to walk very carefully. Be careful of your steps before those who are on the outside. Look at it this way. You may be the best Christian somebody knows. And if you are the best Christian somebody knows, you certainly want them to think well of what it means to be a Christian. So walk carefully. Let your daily walk be a witness of your faith toward those who are on the outside. There's a man in our church who was talking to me about his father. And he said, you know, Brother Carl, my daddy was the best man I ever knew. And I thought, what a compliment for a son to say that about his father. But I also heard a man who became a Christian later in life say, the man who won me to the Lord lived every day before me a life that made me want to be a Christian. Over the years, I've had some wonderful staff members. I had one or two that maybe didn't reach that, but I've had some wonderful staff members. And when I was the director of the association here in Nashville, I had a staff member that some of you will remember. His name was Clifford Horn. Did any of you ever know Clifford? You did. Clifford was called into the ministry later in life. And he hadn't finished high school. So he went to Harrison-Chilhowie, which is a Baptist high school over in East Tennessee, and finished high school when he was probably in his late 30s. Then he went to Belmont. He never got to go to the seminary. But I think I can say that through the years, Clifford Horn was probably the best staff member I ever had. In terms of faithfulness and dependability, he was tops. When he passed away, his family asked me to do his service, and I did. And I said something in that service that I've only said twice. I said to the congregation, Clifford Horn was a wonderful staff member to me, but more than that, he was a wonderful friend to me. And I said, this is how I feel about him. If I had not been a Christian and had known Clifford Horn as I knew him, I would have wanted to be a Christian. And in my mind, in my heart, that was the best compliment I could give him. I had a deacon in Batesville, Mississippi. His name was Johnny Wagner. He was called to preach after he retired from Tennessee Gas Transmission Company, and he pastored 2 churches before he died. He was in his late 60s when he was called to preach. And when he passed away, the family asked me to come down to Mississippi and do his service. I've never known another person like Johnny Wagner. And I said in his service the same thing that I said about Clifford. If I hadn't been a Christian and known Johnny Wagner as I knew him, I would have wanted to be a Christian. His children still live down there in Mississippi, and they call me all the time, see how I'm doing, and to see if I need anything. That touches my heart. People do that. Touches my heart. Paul said, walk in wisdom before those who are on the outside, so that your life becomes a witness that could attract them to Jesus. And if somebody becomes a Christian because of your Christian life, what a blessing. You haven't lived in vain. If somebody came to Jesus because they knew you. That's what he's saying to these people. Walk carefully so that your life is a witness to them. And then he added something very interesting. Look, redeeming the time. What does that mean, redeeming the time? It really means buying up the opportunities, using your time to the best advantage, and never letting an opportunity go by. Use your opportunities to share your faith. Now, I want us to camp there for a minute. I wonder how many opportunities the Lord presented to me that I didn't use, and for which I will be accountable. The doors of opportunity that God opens for you and me, he intends for us to enter those doors and use those opportunities to the best advantage possible to share our faith. And if you will dedicate yourself to the Lord to use the opportunities He gives you, you're going to be surprised at how many doors He will open for you. And when those opportunities come and they're gone, they don't come back. So redeeming the time, buying up the opportunities, using the opportunities God gives you to be a witness for Jesus. That's what He means. So walk in wisdom, buying up every opportunity that He gives to say a good word, to live a good witness, to speak to someone who needs a good word of encouragement, to help somebody in need. Watch for those opportunities and do it all in the name of Jesus. And God will use the witness that you bear, and in ways that may seem to us miraculous. So verse 5 is walk the walk. Now in verse 6, he's going to say, talk the talk. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. Let's talk about this a little. He's talking to the Christians in Colossae about living a life of witness before those who are on the outside. And he says, in the process, watch your lips. Be careful what you say. Words are so important. And as a Christian, my words ought to always reflect my faith. I wonder why it is we have to listen to so much foul-mouthed stuff this day and time, more so than ever before I can remember. Why do some guys think it's macho to curse and swear? Watch your speech. Hold your place and turn back to Ephesians chapter 4. And look at verse 29, please. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. No corrupt communication. Watch your words. Let your words speak about your faith. And look at verse 15 of the same chapter. but speaking the truth in love may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. Speaking the truth in love. Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, the man speaks. So it's what's in our hearts that comes out of our lips. And it just may be that our words that others hear will either attract them to the faith or turn them away. Words can be used in so many ways. There are sharp, cutting, hurtful words. There are ugly, corrupt, bad words. But when the Lord saves us, he gives us a new heart, and our words should reflect what's in our hearts. And he says to these Colossians, let your speech always be with grace. I want to meddle a little bit. Is that okay? Do you fly off the handle sometimes and say things you wish you hadn't said? I have. And it's not a good feeling. And some people use awful words in the presence of children. That may be an influence that those children will take with them the rest of their lives. Bad words. He also says, let your speech be seasoned with salt. What in the world does that mean? You ever say to somebody, now you take this with a grain of salt? You said it? You've heard that, haven't you? That's where it came from, right there. Salt does two things, doesn't it? Salt purifies. It takes care of things. And salt flavors. So they put salt on meat to preserve it. And I put salt on cantaloupe to make it better. And by the way, who would ever eat a bowl of grits without salt? And I love grits. My mama had grits every morning of my childhood days. When I see a bowl of grits now, Randy, I want to salute. Because grits saved my life many a day. But you can't eat grits without salt. So salt purifies and salt flavors. That's what he means. Let your speech be seasoned with salt. Purifies and flavorful. And always with grace. You see that word in that verse? Let your speech be always with grace. I had a man down in Mississippi who worked at the mental institution over at Whitfield. And I asked him one day, what's the biggest problem that you have over there? He said, it's the language we listen to. I was surprised at that. But it says to me, if a person's speech is all filthy and coarse and mean, he's not only got heart problems, he's got mind problems. Watch what comes out of your mouth. I want you to turn now to the book of James, the 3rd chapter, and let's see what James tells us about our speech. You'll find it right on over close to the book of Revelation. Chapter 3, look at verse 2. For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn about the whole body. Behold also the ships, which though they be so great and are driven of fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beasts and birds and serpents and things in the sea is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Therewith we bless God, even the Father, and therewith we curse men, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceed the blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. So he says, those on the outside will be touched and affected by the way you walk, but also by the way you talk. Watch your words. I have in my class a former football coach, and he's going to be president of my class next church year. His name is Don Sargent. I really enjoy being around him. We talk a lot about football and other sports. But he brought me a prayer that his son sent to him. And I want you to write this down. It's a short prayer, but it's got a lot in it. The prayer said, Lord, keep your arms around my shoulders and your hand on my mouth. Isn't that an interesting prayer? Keep your arms around my shoulders and your hand on my mouth. Did you ever watch the TV show called The Honeymooners years ago? You remember Jackie, what was his name? Jackie Gleason. Every once in a while he'd get in trouble and they'd ask him why he did that. He said, because I've got a big mouth. Well, I guess we'll all have to admit that sometimes we've got a big mouth. But I like that prayer. Keep your arm around my shoulders, Lord, and your hand on my mouth so that I don't say things I shouldn't say. I promise next Wednesday will be the conclusion. But if you have to miss a Wednesday night between now and Christmas, don't miss next Wednesday night. This one will be in some ways the most interesting study that we've had in the book of Colossians. So I hope you can be here with us. And then we'll move to 1 Peter. I thank you for being here.